Whether you just picked up your first Sony camera or you're a seasoned Sony user, there is always some little feature hidden inside these cameras that you can still learn. So in this video, I'm gonna go over 11 Sony camera settings that I personally think more people need to know because they can totally have the ability to make your experience with your camera that much better. And specifically, I'm always surprised that more people don't know about number 11. But before I get too deep into this, I have a request. Once you've watched through this video, if you have another tip that you think everyone should know, leave it down in the comments, okay? Cool. Secure the cup and let's get into it. Okay, quick disclaimer, I'm gonna be showing you all of these features on the Sony a7 IV because it's one of the more common current Sony cameras. Depending on which camera you have, these settings might be a little bit different for you. You may actually have more options or you may have less, but in general, all the Sony cameras that they've released in the last handful of years should have everything that I'm going to show you. So kicking things off with the first setting, this one is for the hybrid photo and video shooters out there, and it's to set your shutter button as a video record button when in movie mode. In its default state, when you switch your camera into movie mode, the shutter button will give you an error message saying that you can't shoot photos right now. But if we go into the menu, head down to the setup menu, over to Operation Customize, at the bottom you'll see movie record with shutter. Turn that on, and now you can use your shutter button to start and stop recording videos in movie mode. And that might not seem like much, but it also brings us to setting number 2 on this list. Now that we've set our shutter to be the movie record button, we don't actually need this dedicated movie button anymore, so we can customize that to be whatever the heck we want it to be. If you go into your Operation Customize again, choose the movie custom key settings, and then the one that lines up with that record button wherever it may be on your specific camera, and you can set it to whatever you want. Unfortunately, it's always going to look like a record button, and if you hand your camera to someone else for them to get a video for you, it will confuse them a lot if you don't explain first, but this really maximizes your versatility of your button layout. The third setting should ease your mind if you're worried at all about overheating on your Sony camera, and personally, I think it should come as the default setting, and that is the auto power off temperature setting. On some of the newer Sony cameras, this pops up as an option when you're setting up the camera for the first time, but just in case it doesn't, or if you missed it, you can find it in the setup menu under power setting option as auto power off temp. And what we want to do is set this to high. You'll see a little warning letting you know that it might get hot in order to prioritize the record time. Just hit OK here, that is what we want. Basically, this just allows the camera to get up to a higher temperature before it turns it off for safety. But I have never heard of that causing any problems for anyone whatsoever. It allows you to really get the most out of your camera without having to deal with overheating issues. Next, something that seems to have slipped by a lot of people is the fact that you can have different shooting settings in photo and video mode. Let me explain. You may already know that you can have different dials and custom buttons for photo and video modes by going into Operation Customize, choosing either the photo or video selections, and then making your dials and custom buttons what you want. This way, you can customize the button layout for what makes sense for that type of shooting. And you may also already know that there are custom function menu settings for both photo and video, so when you customize the function menu, they show up on top of one another. But what you may not know is that if you go just below that to different set for still/movie, you can choose which settings will stay the same or change when you switch between photos and videos. For example, I often shoot photos at a much higher shutter speed than my videos, and I want it to go back to the right shutter speed for video when I switch to it, so I would select that as an option. I also shoot with a picture profile in video mode, but not in photo mode, so I would select that as well. In fact, personally, I select every single thing on this menu because I want it to be different between stills and videos, except for white balance, because chances are if I'm doing a quick switch between video and photo, the white balance can probably stay the same for that situation. The next setting is a huge help when you're using the electronic viewfinder, particularly for those people who don't have the joystick on their cameras. I'm looking at you, A7C Mark II. If we go in our menu under Setup, under Touch Operation, we're going to find a menu called Touch Panel/Pad. Go in there and change it to both valid. When you're looking at the monitor on the back, the touch capabilities will be just how you're probably used to them. You can touch to track or you can touch to set the focus point, but now when you use the viewfinder, you can still touch the screen to move your focus point. And if we go back to the menu under touchpad settings, we've got some extra options to turn it on or off in vertical orientation. We can choose whether the touch position will be relative to our current focus point position when we put our finger on the touchscreen, or whether it will be in an absolute position. I personally prefer the relative option. And we can also choose which part of the screen works as the touchpad, just in case we're worried about our nose hitting the screen. I love the joystick on my A7 IV, but I will admit that this works really smoothly too, maybe even better. The next setting has to do with how we record our photos and videos on the SD cards, and it will make your life so much easier in the organizational realm later. If we head to the menu under Shooting and Media, we'll see Record Media Settings. If your camera has multiple card slots, this is where we can choose all sorts of different options. Personally, under both photo and video, I choose simultaneous recording so that it saves the same photos and videos on both cards, so I've got an immediate backup right on site. But you could also choose to do something like photos on the card in slot 1 and videos on the card in slot 2, or the other way around. Also, under the photo options, you can choose Sort Recording and then go down to Image Quality Settings and choose to record RAW photos on one card and JPEGs on the other if you prefer to set things up that way. Lots of options there depending on how you like to organize and back up your media. Unfortunately, for those cameras that only have one card slot, this doesn't really apply. But that also brings me to the next setting, which is custom file names and folder structures. Heading back into our menu, if we go one down from Media to File under the Shooting menu, we'll see something called File/Folder Settings. This is going to look a little bit different depending on your camera and whether you're in video or photo mode. This File/Folder one is on the A7 IV in photo mode. Under this, we can choose whether we want the number to continuously count or auto reset back to 0001 when the files are put in a new folder. Beneath that, you can force a number reset if you'd like. Then we can set the first 3 characters of the file name. We can put it whatever we want, but I like to have mine as the camera name. And then there's a preview of what our file will look like at the bottom. Below the file name customization, we've got options for the folder name. You can choose either date form or standard form. In standard form, you'll get a photos folder like normal until you choose to create a new folder, or if you select a different folder from the previous menu if you've already created multiple. If you choose date form, it will create a new folder for each date and record the photos accordingly. In video mode, we have something called file settings, but we've got some different naming options like standard, title, date and title, or title and date. Personally, I like to choose date and title. Then you can choose a custom title to add. Again, I like to add my camera name, and you can see a little preview of how it will look at the bottom, except that the date would actually fill in numbers where all those letters are. Setting this all up makes it so much easier to know what files you're looking at without always having to dive in and preview them. Earlier, we talked about custom buttons for photo and video modes, but there are also custom buttons for the playback mode as well, and that brings us to our next setting, which is rating photos right in the camera. If we go into our menu under Setup and Operation Customize again, we'll see the playback custom key settings, and we can go under Selection Memo on any of our customizable buttons to choose rating. After you choose rating, it'll come up with another screen where you can choose which available ratings you want to scroll through. So it can be just 1 star, or just 5-star, or 3-star, or all of them if you want. Now, when you're reviewing your photos, you can hit that button to cycle through how many stars you want to rank it, and then it will show up like that in your editing software. So let's say you're working with someone and you want to ask them which option they like best, you can actually mark it right then and there, and it will be there for you later when you get into editing. And while we're in playback mode, the next setting is picture grouping. If we go into the playback menu, under playback option, there's something called display as group. If we turn this on, a couple of things happen. First, any set of photos that we shot with an interval timer or any kind of burst mode will get put into a group. In playback mode, you just have to click one more time to open that group up, and then you can scroll through it as usual. But the other thing that you can do is play back that group in succession. so you get a little preview of a bunch of photos or a time lapse that you shot. All you do is hit the down button on the back dial, and then you can set the speed by turning that dial as well. If things are moving too quickly for you to get the speed dialed in, you can also go and do that from the menus. And as if that wasn't enough fun, in the playback menu, there is also the ability to see where your camera was focusing to check and make sure that you really hit the part of the image that you were trying to. If we go back into our playback menu, under the playback option again, there's something called focus frame display. And if we turn that on, now our photos will have a box around where the camera was trying to focus when it took that photo. So you can make sure that it was focusing on the right thing even before you start to zoom in on it to check. Unfortunately, this only works in photo mode, but that's probably when you would need it the most anyway. And the 11th setting that, like I said before, I'm always kind of surprised to hear when people don't know about it, is that the joystick on your camera is also a customizable button. If your camera has a joystick, then you get 2 for the price of 1 here. In the custom key and dial setup option, find the one that looks like it's in the spot of your joystick. That's not actually customizing the joystick part, it's customizing what it does when you click it in. Personally, I like to set it to focus area because then it feels like it's kind of connected to what the joystick does by moving the focus point around. When I'm shooting, I can then press it in and quickly switch between a wide focus area and a spot mode, and then without ever removing my thumb, I can move where that spot is. But if you have another custom function that you want one more button for, maybe this is what that could be used for. So like I said before, now that you've heard my 11, if you have any other settings that you think that people should know, leave them down in the comments below and share the knowledge. And make sure to share this video so that you can help out all of the other Sony users out there. Make sure to check this one out next. I think you'll really like it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.